When I just went through these questions and planned all of my answers, I made some unfortunate discoveries. So you'll see what I mean, but it's fine. We're everybody laugh at Noel. Throw tomatoes. Tomato, tomato, tomato. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new here. My name is Noel. The 7 is my Enneagram type, and I have been procrastinating this video simply because I know I'm about to expose myself. Let's do it. Let's do it. I made a couple of videos at the beginning of the year of like yearly TBRs or anticipated reads, books I need to read or authors to read, all of that stuff. I know without even watching those videos again that I'm pretty sure I'm deeply failing. The mid-year book freakout tag, I love this tag, even though it fills me with dread a little bit also. It's just such a classic, you know? I've been watching it for years and years and years, and last year I think was the first year I made one on my channel, so I will link that below, even though I'm also a little bit scared to watch that, because have I read any of those in that video? I don't know. But any fun excuse to, you know, review and audit the reading that I have done is a good excuse for me, the Virgo, right? Basically, this is just mid-year superlatives for a bunch of books. Okay, number 1 on the list, starting strong, is the best book that you have read so far in 2022. So I took a little look-see at my Storygraph data for the year. It does this really cute, convenient thing where it just tells you all of the data depending on the mood, the length, your average rating, your average genres, all of that stuff. So I was able to very easily see that I have already read 10 5-star books this year, which is a pretty good amount, pretty good ratio, I think. And then looking at those 10 5-star books that I've already read this year was a real challenge to pick a favorite. And honestly, the one that I landed on, maybe because as of filming this, we just had the live show for this a few days ago, but I chose Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. It's actually right here. Lessons in Chemistry. This is, I think, the best book that I read so far this year. So this was the May pick for my book club, Hot Girl Book Club. This is about a chemist, Elizabeth Zott, in the 1960s who keeps running up against all kinds of just disgusting discrimination and assumptions made about her in her field of chemistry at this time, about her being a woman and her not being taken seriously, her research not being taken seriously, her just being skipped over for opportunities that she objectively deserves, and all kinds of other hijinks and things that happened to her in her career, and also the way that she meets her partner and what happens years later when she ends up becoming this reluctant host of a daytime TV show aimed at America's housewives. It's meant to be like an afternoon cooking show for the quote-unquote average plain Jane cooking dinner at home in the 60s. And Elizabeth Zott finds herself as somehow the host of this TV show and refuses to pander to the housewife stereotypes, and she rarely smiles. She doesn't like all of the like cheesy decor on the TV set. She takes cooking very seriously and talks about cooking as if it is chemistry, which it is, and it says everything very straightforward, no nonsense. She uses the chemical names for things, and it becomes this sweeping phenomenon across the country of all of these housewives looking up to her and admiring her because she's speaking to them woman to woman, adult to adult, about something serious, you know, and taking these women seriously. And I cannot explain and do this book true justice. It's just so good, and it's funny, and it's sad, and it's profound, and it's hopeful and inspiring, and just so good. It's so good. The more that I talk about it and ramble about it right now is really solidifying that this is my favorite of the year so far. And Rachel and I discussed for like a whole hour and a half the other day how much we both really enjoyed it. This is only the first question, so I think I'm gonna continue, but if nothing else from this video, you should read this. You should read this. Question 2 is the best sequel that you have read in 2022 so far, and 2022? 2022. Am I having a stroke? 2022. Okay. Right? I discovered, even though I made a whole video about the series and sequels specifically that I wanted to finish this year, I haven't read one, not a single sequel, not one. I haven't even read multiple books from the same author this year. Otherwise, I would have tried to count that. None. What am I doing? So really this was the kick in the butt that I needed to go and pick up that goal again so that I can actually continue all of those series and sequels that I talked about 6 months ago so that I don't have an even more shameful end of year review. So really this was a good thing. But yeah, zero, none. The next question is a new release that you haven't read yet, but you really want to. And I'm going to say a sequel. So we picked Fevered Star, which is right there. It's probably, I think it's barely in frame. It's right there at the bottom of this stack, and I don't want to take the whole stack down. So right there, Fevered Star. Because this is the next in the Between Earth and Sky series from Rebecca Roanhorse. If you don't know, or you haven't heard me just rave and rave about Black Sun already, this is a really exciting, very fresh, new adult fantasy. I always say that in such a strange way. It's an adult fantasy that is new, not a new adult fantasy, you know? New to the scene adult fantasy, where it's inspired by pre-colonized Americas. So a lot of indigenous culture and history and customs and religions are woven into the texture and feel and atmosphere of this world and the plot and the characters and just everything. And it's so, so good. And Black Sun, we have 4 different POVs. And every single one of them I'm obsessed with and fully invested in, and I can't wait to see what happens to all of my little babies in Fevered Star. Question 4 is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for this one, I chose Babel by R.F. Kuang. A standalone fantasy about the power of language is pretty much just made for me. You're a resident nerdy linguist who loves language and translation and words and all of those kinds of things, plus fantasy. Yes, give it to me. Give it to me now. That I'm very excited for. And also, bonus answer, I'm looking forward to the 3rd book in the Foundry Side series, which comes out the end of June. It's called Locklands, which is funny because I didn't realize that this was even a trilogy. I thought it was a duology, Foundry Side and Shorefall, which I also haven't read. It's fine. So Foundry Side, the first in this series, is a sci-fi fantasy book where the magic is based in physics, and it has a very much so like steampunk kind of a feel to it. And it's just such a unique and interesting magic system and world. It's 100% of the characters are morally gray. It starts with a heist, and then turns into another heist at like the end of the book. It's just the whole book is like heisty, morally gray, physics, magic goodness, and what is there not to love about that, you know? So Shorefall I haven't picked up yet because I know it's going to be different from like the heist chaos of the first one. Is there rainbows on my face? I mean, I guess it is Pride. Maybe I should leave them, but it might be distracting. They're my window crystals that always pick up the afternoon sun. Number 5, we have the biggest disappointment of the year so far. And I had to really think about this one because there hasn't been a lot of books that have really disappointed me. There's been books that I have hated and books that I have loved, but not a lot of more nuanced emotions. So the one that I landed on, I did actually hate, but it was disappointing because of what I think it perpetuates in the genre, which this is a book called A Woman of Intelligence and is marketed as women's fiction, which is just a label that I don't love in general. And this is about a woman in New York City who had this prolific career working for the United Nations, and she speaks like 5 languages and then gives it all up to become a stay-at-home housewife and eventually mother for her rich Fifth Avenue hubby, who for some reason doesn't like the idea of her continuing her own career. And it's supposed to be this empowering story of a woman who's just misunderstood in her home and underestimated by her husband and in-laws, and finds this fulfilling new career in intelligence and working as a spy. And that was not delivered on in any kind of satisfying way. I felt it was... I did not like the stereotypes that it leaned on, and I did not like the way that it had this woman get back into intelligence, even though she already had an extensive, impressive career in the field. I don't know, it was just a disappointment, and I didn't like it being women's fiction because it just continues the stereotype that women's fiction is for like housewives, which is just complete bullshit, and I don't like that at all. Like, we could just, that can just be general fiction, that can just be literary fiction or historical fiction. But just because a main protagonist happens to be a certain kind of woman or lives a certain life, we brand those books as women's fiction, and I don't like that. So that was disappointing. And I will get off of my soapbox now, but there you have it. Next is biggest surprise. Hopefully I'm not overblown. I just changed a bunch of settings on my camera today, and I'm hoping that I don't regret it. But if I'm overexposed, then that's for me to worry about later. It's fine. For biggest surprise, I have 2 that I picked also. The first biggest surprise is Outlawed, which is also right behind me, I think. So Outlawed, biggest surprise number 1, because I had heard not very good reviews of this, but I very thoroughly enjoyed this and was surprised by how thoroughly I enjoyed it. All I wanted was a women-driven rootin' tootin' western, and that is what I got. So I don't understand the negative reviews, genuinely. Our main character finds herself to be infertile in the late 1800s. Yeah, 1894. But they don't have that word, infertility. They just call it barrenness. And this takes place in what used to be the United States, but there was this wide-swept flu that killed 9 out of 10 Americans decades before the start of the story. And so it kind of reverts society back to what was like the Old West time. And there's this new religion that understandably, I guess, thrives on the idea of women having children. So women that aren't able to have children for whatever mysterious reason are, they become like new pariahs, even going so far as to be accused of witchcraft or placing curses on other women in their communities that may miscarry or have other complications with their pregnancy or children. And so this woman, our hero, is ostracized and cast out from her life, and she ends up running with this band of outlaws that are also barren, and they just get up to all kinds of Old West mischief, such as, you know, robberies and thieving and living in their outpost, their secret outpost, while they recoup for their next big hit or whatever. And yes, the ending is weird. I liked it though. The next surprise was a more recent read for me that I read for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and this is The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki, which was just announced this week that it was also the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction, which I'm so excited about because of the ones that I've read from the long list this year, this was my favorite. The Book of Form and Emptiness, and it took me by such surprise. Honestly, I had kind of expected that it would be a bit of a slog to get through. It's very long. I listened to it on audiobook. I think it was like 19 hours. Yep, 19 hours exactly. God, I am good. This is such a difficult book to try and explain, so I'm gonna do it briefly and really vague, and you just have to trust me. If you like family drama, if you like mother-son relationships, if you like stories from a children's perspective with a sprinkle of surrealism or magical realism on top as part of the storytelling journey, this is the book for you. There's a lot of discussions about mental health, especially in the schizophrenia umbrella. There's a lot to do with family and grief and acceptance and being othered, and it's such a special book, and I hope that being the winner of the Women's Prize draws a lot more readers to it, because this is like an honest masterpiece, and I don't think I ever would have picked it up if not for the Women's Prize. So I'm really grateful, because this was like such a shocker and is also one of the best books I've read this year so far. So really cool. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Okay, the next couple I'm going to talk about the same book. So number 7 is a favorite new author, debut or new to you author. And I've chosen Fonda Lee, author of The Genius, Jade City, which is, again, the only one I've read in the series. So I haven't read any of the sequels yet, but I'm going to, because my friends who host the Fantaseries book club are right now reading the Greenbone Saga for Fantaseries. So I'm gonna try and hop on and read the sequels with them. The way that Fonda Lee writes, like, single-handedly got me back into fantasy, because since reading Jade City, I have read a whole handful of other fantasy since. It just made me fall back in love with the genre. I had really been in a fantasy drought for months before this. Randomly fell off the fantasy horse, but now I'm fully back on that horse. So happily back on the horse. And it has everything to do with Fonda Lee and the way that she so carefully crafted this immersive magic system and world and politics, and the characters in Jade City I just completely adore, and her twists and turns and the writing. This was also like a 19-hour audiobook, and it flew by. This was one of those audiobooks where if I had like 5 minutes, I would listen to it. Like every spare moment I had, I listened to it, and I was sad when it ended, because I just want more. So thank you, Fonda Lee, for this absolute work of art. And the next question, who is your newest fictional crush, is also from Jade City. I went with Hilo, who is one of the characters from Jade City. Obsessed. Love Hilo. Love the charisma, and the confidence, I should say, I guess. Number 9 is your newest favorite character, and this is a very, very recent read that I'm gonna go with. Also right behind me. My new favorite characters are Dev and Charlie from the Charm Offensive, and thank you, Bookstagram, for convincing me to pick this up, because this was such a treasure of a read. And Dev and Charlie independently are both such good characters and so well written, and their personalities are just so rich. They truly both feel like real people, and then seeing their dynamic together over the course of this book was just a joy, and I want more. Loved it. The Charm Offensive is a rom-com with one of my favorite tropes, which is the reality TV setting, where Dev is one of the producers on this show, which is basically The Bachelor, and Charlie is cast as the lead on this Bachelor show, and he has 20 women that he's supposed to be dating, but he's this really awkward, like, techie guy, and so Dev becomes like his handler and like his producer for the show, and they spend a lot of time together and develop this really great working relationship, and then a friendship, and then other stuff. It's so good, and I already want to read it again, because this brought me a lot of joy and such happiness. I can't, every time I think about it, I just start smiling again. So good. So good. And now we're gonna take a complete swerve to a different vibe and go with a book that made you cry. And you already know that this is Daughters of Sparta. And if you didn't see my vlog where I read this and sob about it and just go on and on about how nobody is talking about this book and it was just so good, here's the link for you, because we did that. Daughters of Sparta is about these two sisters that's basically like the women of Troy, not the women of Troy, but Helen of Troy and her sister Clytemnestra or Nestra, and what happens to them in the Siege of Troy myth that is so famous and so retold over and over, but we rarely get the actual perspective or lives of the women themselves. And this was told from both of their POVs over decades before, during, and after the Siege of Troy. And this is another one where trying to explain this book does not nearly do it justice that it deserves. I'm also afraid of overhyping this one because it has no hype. There is no hype for this book, to the point where I was nervous to go into it, like afraid that it might be garbage. It is so not garbage. It is so profoundly not garbage that if you are a Greek retelling girly, this has to be on your radar. And that is, I think, all I'm going to say about it right now. But I absolutely sobbed. That's the prompt. Next, we have a book that made you happy, and easiest pick, probably the easiest one on this entire list, a book that made me happy, is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Everyone is so right about this book. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I thought this might be cheesy. I thought this might be cliche. It was neither. It was just refreshing and fun and made me so happy. I loved how self-aware this book was as far as a fantasy book that uses so many classic fantasy tropes and ideas and plots, where there's so many different fantasy races and creatures, and just like, it just made me think of D&D and the nostalgia and richness that a D&D campaign has, or a classic fantasy story would have, like getting a gang together and going on a quest. Is that feel, except getting a gang together and going on a quest is getting a group of employees and friends together, and the quest is opening a coffee shop. It's so much fun. Literally, the top blurb says, a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. I need 50 more books in this world with these characters doing similar things. And I'm pretty sure this was already approved for a sequel or something. And I hope there's more after that, because I need more. This was way too good. Way too much fun for its own good. All right, the next question, number 12, is the most beautiful book that you have bought so far this year. And this was quite a difficult choice. Quite a difficult one. So I've also picked two. One of which I just actually recently finished. That was also a joy, which is In Deeper Waters. Is a YA standalone fantasy. It's just good. It's just good. Gay pirates? Enough said. I really enjoyed it, actually. This really took me by surprise. But I love the cover. This is art in its own right. Just, you know, but wow. Just feast your eyes upon this masterpiece. But also another one that I don't think I have hauled, that admittedly started as a cover buy, and then I looked up what it was about, and it just sounds really good. But this is The Devourers by Indra Das, and I'll give you a minute to appreciate. I love the illustration style. It just feels kind of like dark and gothic. I love the smoke and skull on the back here. The Devourers, Indian magical fantasy horror folktale adventure, where this college professor in India stumbles upon this mysterious stranger who tells him this myth, folktale. And the college professor is like, well, what's the end? What's the end? And the stranger is like, well, I don't know. We have these parchment transcripts that no one can translate. If you could translate them, then I'll finish the story. So the professor agrees to translate these documents, and then weird stuff starts to happen. Sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good. Okay, lastly, the last question is also embarrassing. It's, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Which, too many. I'm going to refer to the authors I need to read video that I made in January, that I think I've barely touched, and the sci-fi and fantasy series I want to finish video that I also made in January, that I have barely touched. I've started a few of those, haven't finished any of them, as we've already talked about. But the priorities from both of those that I'm going to officially say will be the Greenbone Saga, because I think that's actually attainable, because I'm going to read it with Fantaseries. So I need to read Jade War and Jade Legacy for Greenbone Saga. I want to finish the Daevabad trilogy, because I've only read City of Brass, and then there's Kingdom of Copper, Empire of Gold, and also the Red Rising trilogy, because again, still I have only read Red Rising, and I haven't finished Golden Sun, and then there's also Morning Star, yeah, is the third one in that trilogy. So those, you heard it here first, are my top priorities as far as finishing series goes. My updated, revised series goal mid-year. But I do still, of course, want to get to all of the ones I mentioned earlier in the year. That is all for this year's mid-year freakout tag. I can't wait to see everyone else doing this tag. It's one of my favorite videos that is just a staple of booktube, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for watching this video. If you made it to the end and you just want to leave me a comment, you can leave me the sunshine emoji, just for fun. Summer is my favorite season, and you know, even though I'm in a hoodie today, it's a little cold today, but I'm excited to be finally embracing the summer vibes. Have you read any of these? Do you want to read any of these? Do you have any mid-year goals or epiphanies? I would love to know all of the things, as always. And if you'd like to follow me outside of this YouTube box, you are welcome to come follow me on Instagram, a different social media box, at Noelle7Pages. And we can hang out over there and do more silly, fun, bookish things. Would love to be your pal over on the gram. In the meantime, I hope you are well. Thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon. Love you, bye.